Church-of-Mabus.
Into the light. That may be your fantasy.
Sexy.
Metaphysical.
The dark side.
Haunted houses. I like anything horror. I like sauna. All of it. All of it.
Deeper and 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 higher.
Oh yeah, me like it.
Higher, deeper and higher and higher and higher and deeper and deeper and higher.
You mean I could go mad?
I am the Lord. Rocket, rocket, rocket.
I'm shaking.
The Church-of-Mabus.
I'm stoked. I'm stoked. I'm ready. This is awesome.
I guess we are on time.
Yeah, we're in a different alternate reality anyway, so we don't abide by
Right.
the mechanisms of mortal time, silly mortal.
Why would you?
Exactly. Well, you're listening to 107.7 New Orleans and 105.3 Henderson Point, Mississippi. And let me give a shout-out to our sponsors, QualityLiquorStore.com in San Diego, California. That's QualityLiquorStore.com in San Diego, California. And also we got to plug to another sponsor. That's Secret Stash Glass on Etsy. Tobacco pipes are hand-blown glass pipes. That's at Etsy.com/shop/Secret Stash Glass. You can just go on Etsy and type in Secret Stash Glass. That's right. Also,
nice.
I want to plug some books that I'm reading. I've always liked The Walking Dead, and I've had the comic books sitting on my computer forever. I just never got around to reading them. So finally, I bought all the comics. They have them like 1,000-page books. I bought 2 books.
Right.
Each book is 2,000 pages. And then I also started collecting the Walking Dead fiction books by St. Martin's Press. One's called Descent. Another one's called The Fall of the Governor 1 and Part 2. And another one's Rise of the Governor. And another one's The Road to Woodbury. And they all.
I just saw those books at Half Price Bookstore yesterday.
They're pretty good. They're for a taste of that universe. I haven't quite had a universe pull me in a while, like The Walking Dead has. It's Ebola training.
Right. Ebola training.
Yeah, I think The Walking Dead's kind of prophetic of what is to come as far as. So the zombies aren't walking around. They're still in the bed, and they're probably not going to leave the bed ever.
Yeah.
But I do think...
And there's not going to be as many cool gear-up scenes.
I do think there'll be a lot of asshats trying to eat you and take your water and rape you.
I definitely think that that's the case, yeah. I just don't think that somebody that sat around for the last 5 years eating Doritos and playing video games is going to become a samurai all of a sudden. But that seems to be what people think, you know?
We're food.
Yeah. Yeah.
Little barbecue sauce with that gamer, and you're ready to roll if you're a
barbecue
cannibal.
sauce.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I like The Walking Dead. I mean, not only does it have zombies and stuff like that, but it has that's kind of Mad Max. It does have a Mad Max thing going on, you know, it's complete anarchy, and you got, you know, crazy people trying to survive. That's why it's so appealing.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see the premiere?
Yes, I did. It was amazing. I don't know how people, because I had talked to some people who had screened it beforehand, and they said that it wasn't that good. And I was like, whatever, man. I'm going to see it for myself. And I saw it for myself, and it was awesome.
Yeah, people are so uptight lately. Like, they're just completely anal retentive. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's great. You're always going to have somebody saying it's terrible even when it's great. It's just the way it is. It's the human personality.
Right.
It's there. But let me see. Oh, yeah, next week's guest is Lon Milo Duquette. I probably didn't say his name right. He's going to have to correct me. His book is Horror and the Occult.
Right.
Wiser Book of Horror and the Occult. And Hidden Magic, Occult Truths, and the Stories That Started It All. And basically there's stories in here from Aleister Crowley, Edgar Allan Poe, H.P. Lovecraft, Bram Stoker.
Awesome.
A bunch of people I'm not familiar with, but basically we're going to be talking horror. It's going to be our Halloween show. Wham will be here, and Beazle.
Indeed. That's right.
That's right, for the Halloween show.
Yeah. It's going to be a tag team throwdown.
That's right. It's a hell of a Halloween show. All of us are going to be there with this guy. And he's a gentleman that wears a suit. A smooth gentleman, this Lon guy. He's going to tell a story. Scary stories for Halloween. We're not going to have a show October 31st because it's Halloween. I got to go out and, you know, do Halloween stuff. We'll be at home watching horror movies.
Right. Eat candy until you throw up, that kind of stuff.
Like I do every day.
Yeah. Every day is Halloween.
Exactly. Like the ministry song.
Indeed. Yeah, that's all pretty awesome.
Pretty awesome. Pretty groovy.
Yeah.
And like I said, we'll have no show that Halloween because I figure Joe's probably going to be out trick-or-treating and stuff. So
probably. I mean, he's in New Orleans, so.
I don't want to deny Joe his trick-or-treat.
I mean, why would you?
Trick-or-treating for JoJo. All right. Tonight's guest is Dennis Waller. We're going to be talking about his book. In Search of the Kushtaka. He's going to have to make sure. I'm not sure if I said that correctly. Kushtaka, Alaska's Other Bigfoot. How you doing, Dennis? Did I say that right? I've been trying to say it all day for all day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you got it right. There's actually two ways you can say it. You can say Kushtaka or you can say the Kushtaka. In Alaska, in the middle of winter, you never open your mouth to talk, so you always talk with your teeth closed. So in the wintertime, it's Kushtaka. But yeah, you got it right.
I've been saying it all day out loud. They're probably going to come behead me tonight.
Yeah. It was definitely a pretty awesome topic. I've never heard of the Kushtaka before, so I'm pretty much looking forward to getting a little education here.
Definitely. What's your origin story? How did you seek out this subject, Dennis?
Well, you know, I've always had an interest in the paranormal and conspiracy theories and things along that lines ever since I was a kid. But I was working on a completely unrelated project, and I ran across a guy's blog, and he wrote about his experience and encounter with the Kushtaka. And it was such a fascinating story that I literally read it 3 times that night. And each time I read it, I just even got more excited because I could see elements in his story, in connection to that story, that nobody else could see. So I emailed him, we started talking, and even to this day, he will not go on camera, he won't get on the phone and acknowledge who he is in fear of retaliation. But it was such a fascinating story that when I started doing research on it, I soon discovered that nobody's really done anything on the subject of any substance. So I just dove in head first, and I tell you, the more I got into it, the more fascinating it became. And it's been such a fascinating subject that I actually amended and came out with a second edition with additional information I've discovered about this phenomenon.
Awesome.
And,
well, I mean...
Yeah, go ahead, Beazle.
I mean, what's is he in fear of ramification from the Kushtaka or something else?
Do you want? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Is he in fear of having problems with the Kushtaka? Is that why he won't come forward?
Yes. He. I have visited with people who have claimed to have firsthand experiences with this phenomenon, and they were all life-changing events for these people. The Kushtaka, if I had to summarize it in one sentence, it's a mythical, shape-shifting creature who is capable of taking your darkest fears and turn it into a hellish reality. And one of the things I noticed early on in my research is the similarities to other mythologies around the world. In Japan, it's the kitsune, or the fox spirit. In Southeast Alaska, for the Tlingit Indians, it's the otter man, which literally is Kushtaka in Tlingit. Even in South America, throughout Argentina and Chile, there is an otter man mythology. But deeper than that is when you start studying these mythologies, they're all extremely similar, but they all resonate with the fallen angels and Nephilim, demons and such. So it's one of those subjects where you can just make so many connections to so many different theories and points of view that it's just really remarkable. But the people I have talked to, I am thoroughly convinced that they definitely experienced something, because these are otherwise very sane, normal people who never felt they would have anything like this happen to them. And like I said, it's been a life-changing event for them.
Well.
So what is the tribes in Alaska that this revolves around, like the native tribes and all that stuff?
Well, in Southeast Alaska, it's a little strip of land, and it's called the Inside Passage. And for the most part, the only way you can navigate inside the Inside Passage is by boat. You know, Juneau is the capital of Alaska, and this is really remarkable. It's the only capital that you can only get to it by plane or boat. You cannot get in the car and drive to it. So even by today's standards, a lot of these communities are still very isolated from the outside world. You know, anybody who's been watching all the shows based in Alaska know from watching those shows how isolated these people are and how far they are from anything up there. But the Tlingit Indians is the primary tribe up there in the Inside Passage in Southeast Alaska. And they were discovered in the 1750s by the Russians, who came into the Inside Passage in search of wealth for the Tsar of Russia. And that's when they started to build their trading posts and forts and started to trade with these folks. And that's when I started getting some of my earliest reports or records of the Kushtaka was from the Russian sailors who, out of sheer boredom, didn't have anything else to do, and learned how to communicate with the natives. And these tales were so far-fetched by their standards that they started to record them and take them back home and share it. It was, even by their standards, it was just simply remarkable.
Right.
So I read that in your book it says the Kushtaka don't like people who don't believe in them or who make fun of them.
Yes.
Things like that, where they get people for making fun of them or something like that?
Well, it's a little deeper than that. The actual Kushtaka are somewhat isolated to that region. And first off, they don't appreciate anybody coming into their territory. And if you do encroach on their territory, they like to have a little respect. And, of course, those that don't believe in the mythology are not going to have any respect. And those are the ones they seem to seek out and say, we're going to teach you a lesson, you know.
Or is that what happens when, like, the redneckish Bigfoot hunters that are there, they would probably shoot it dead if they could. They come into the woods and then suddenly they get rocks thrown at them and howls. Or do you think there are different kinds of Bigfoot, like maybe some are good and this just a specific type? Well, according to some of your theories, they shape-shift, so the Bigfoot in general could just be a specific shape that they manifest into at times too, right?
Right. And I've talked extensively with Michael Johnson out of Parker, Colorado, who heads up an investigative team up there. And I have talked to other people within the field, and there is a consensus that some believe that the Bigfoot are capable of not so necessarily shape-shifting as they are shifting in between dimensions. The Kushtaka are not a breed or entity that's going to allow to be captured. It's the other way around. It's the same thing with Bigfoot. I've seen evidence that Michael Johnson has pulled together, and it's just almost impossible you just can't deny that there's definitely something there. But even on Michael's experiences, he says if they sense that you have a respect for them and you will honor and respect their territory, they will respond to you. But if you're going to go in there like a redneck with a 12 gauge, they're either going to ignore you, go for the high ground, or they're just going to teach you a lesson. So there are a lot of similarities between the Bigfoot and the Kushtaka, a lot. But I think that the Kushtaka is a more sinister, a more dark entity than what Bigfoot is. I think my personal opinion on Bigfoot is, hey man, I just want to get along. Let me do my thing.
Yeah.
You do your thing,
neutral.
I do my thing. Yeah, just let me be.
Like lawful neutral or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it seems like the Kushtaka would be, if you want to think of it along these lines, like, I guess more inherently evil than the Bigfoot who might be more lawful neutral or, that type of thing.
Right. And another aspect of the Kushtaka that might separate it from the Bigfoot is their ability to warp time. That's a very common theme in reports. In the book, I talk about a lady who, as a child, was dramatized by the movie Birds, Alfred Hitchcock's Birds. And this was one of these childhood fears that she had. And when she was in the woods that day, that was the furthest thing on her mind. But she literally lived about a 4 to 6 hour nightmare. But yet, when she came back out of the woods, only a couple of minutes had transpired. And what's even more remarkable is her watch and her camera both had moved forward in time this 4 to 6 hours to everybody else's watches had only moved a couple of minutes. And she said that's what really scared the hell out of her. Is she said, I can understand my watch being off, but not my watch and my camera being exact time, 6 hours in the future. So that's another remarkable aspect about the Kushtaka is their ability to warp reality as we know it and create another dimension and put us in that dimension than what we're experiencing now.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that the group there didn't lose time, but one of the ladies did, or do you feel like they've all lost time?
No, in her party, they had stopped there on the Frederick Sound, just opposite of Thomas Bay, and Thomas Bay seems to be ground zero for the Kushtaka. That's where it's alleged in reports by Russian sailors that this village of over 500 people was washed to sea in retribution for the shaman of the village breaking a pact with the Kushtaka. And this happened in 1750. So there's a lot of stories like that up there to where you can coexist with these entities, but if you cross them, there's going to be a price to pay, and that price is going to be your death.
Just don't make any deals.
Do they eat people?
If they did, we wouldn't know it.
Right.
But getting back to your original question, no, the lady went into the woods, and by her watch and by her camera, she experienced this 6 hours of just pure living hell, being eaten alive by these black birds, to the point where she had literally died and had an out-of-body experience. And at that point, when she started crying for God, the entity said, God ain't going to help you now. At that point, she came to, and her friend ran up to her because it looked like she had fallen down. So her clothes were tattered, she was bruised, she was scraped, and her hair was a mess. And her friend kept yelling, what time is it? What time is it? And they said, God, you only been gone for, not even, 2 minutes. And that's when she looked at her watch, and And at that point, she was in a state of confusion and shock. But it wasn't until she got back on the boat and looked at her camera that she could see that there were 6 hours that she experienced that nobody else did. And like I said, this is very common in encounters with the Kushtaka.
Wow, she
Another
insane. ABF hair, just been F'd hair.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are pretty scary because, I mean, most of the Bigfoot stories are like Harry and the Hendersons and all positive and nice and la. So, with a lot of these missing people, I was talking to you about David Polides and missing 411 and all these missing people going from national parks. Do you think these beings may have some sort of kidnapping ring or something like that?
Well, it's interesting you asked that question because within the Tlingit mythology, and this goes back to the creation stories, the raven, which is the creator, actually appointed the otter as his assistant / right-hand man. And one of the things that was granted to the otter was he had the ability to recruit humans and convert them into otters to keep his forces replenished. So all throughout these stories within Tlingit mythology, you have all these stories where you'll have a fisherman who is out in the bay and the storm comes up, his canoe capsizes, and he's clinging on for dear life. And here comes his dead grandfather, paddling up next to him. He says, "Don't worry, son, I've got you covered. Get in the canoe and I'll take you home." But instead of taking him home, the dead grandfather will take him back to the land of the otter people. And at that point, if this lost fisherman doesn't figure this out and get out of there, he will in turn turn into an otterman. So this is the mythology to how the ottermen are able to replenish their forces is by taking humans and converting them into them as to what they are. It doesn't take very far. Do what?
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. It sounds like a totally and completely like supernatural entity. It doesn't. If that's how they reproduce, then that's pretty supernatural.
Well, here's something else that kind of adds credence to all of this. A Tlingit shaman, in order to be a shaman, you must master these spirits. And what a shaman is an emissary between the tribe and the Kushtaka. So the shaman will broker a deal with the Kushtaka that we will do these things for you, as in we'll respect your territories. We won't bring any harm to any of these areas that you say are sacred to you. And we'll coexist in peace. But in exchange for that, if I need you to tell me where a child is that has become lost in the woods, or if I need you to tell me that in this upcoming battle with a rival tribe, I'm going to get my butt kicked or not, I need to know these things. So there's this uneasy alliance between the shamans and the Kushtaka. And from Western reports who have witnessed these shamans communicating with the Kushtaka, they go through a ritual with drums and rattles and things. They go into a trance. And while in this trance, they have basically left their body and gone into the realm of the Kushtaka to where they can sit down and visit with them. Then they come back into their body, come out of the trance, and then from there they're able to communicate to the tribe what they have learned. And this was something that went on extensively, probably up to about the last 100 years, and it was heavily witnessed by missionaries. Of course, you know what the purpose of the missionaries was up there in the 1800s, was to eradicate this type of behavior. But this relationship between the shaman and the Kushtaka is very similar to what you see in Christian or Jewish mysticism, or with other shamans and other indigenous peoples around the world, or even with mediums, or when you channel. The characteristics are very similar. And it's interesting because your guest that you have next week, Lou, is actually written on Iconian magic. And I have actually taught classes here in Dallas on that subject. And that was one of the other that's one of the other bells that went off in my mind, is the characteristics of the Kushtaka are very similar to the hierarchy within Iconian magic with angels, which also coincides with Emanuel Swedenborg's Heaven and Hell that he wrote in 1758. So it's certainly a subject that warrants more investigation into, because I don't think this is just some isolated mythology with a bunch of people that had more time on their hands and just started making this stuff up. I based on what I have learned in my investigation, this is definitely something that's real.
Yeah. Do you think you would attempt that type of communication with the Kushtaka?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I have been told by people who have experienced it firsthand. I've talked to people up there, and they said, you have a death wish. And they said your best case scenario is you die. Worst case scenario, you come back a blubbering idiot that will have to be committed to a mental institution for the rest of your life.
Right.
At this point in my life, I would welcome the challenge.
Right. Yeah, I mean, considering that you've worked heavy with Enochian magic and all that type of thing, you'd probably be prepared for that type of thing to an extent.
Well, I don't know if prepared's the right word. I think an awareness. And see, one of the issues within Iconian magic is you have to be extremely careful when you are summoning one of these entities, because you don't know if the entity is being straight with you and telling you who they really are, or if they're a demon spirit pretending to be who you want them to be until they can get control of you. Now, what we just covered there is what happens in the Catholic faith with exorcisms. How do these demons take over and possess a soul? They can't just go into it. They have to be invited in. So the only way to get invited is just to act like your friend. So like I said, there's so many comparisons and parallels to the Kushtaka. It's just remarkable. And there have been stories where people have just gone just completely nuttier than a fruitcake from their experiences and have had to be committed. One of the stories I put in the book is the Bear Creek incident, where a lady and her kids came home and there was a Bigfoot in their house. So she got scared and she covered her kids up with a blanket, and then she ran back to town to get help. The reason she covered her kids up with a blanket is in that particular tribe, they felt as long as the kids did not see the Bigfoot or the Bigfoot did not see the kids were safe. But in that tribe, the mythology was if your family was seen by this particular Bigfoot, then you would die, period, end of story. And Evan Standerson wrote this and said within 3 years, the entire family was dead by freak accidents. So, I mean, there's several stories out there that once you have an awareness of this mythology and you have the ability to connect the dots to unseemingly unrelated mythologies and stories, you begin to see these stories in a different light. So where some people are saying Bigfoot, I'm seeing something else. And another thing that's remarkable is the UFO community. There's a consensus within part of the UFO community that don't believe that the aliens are actually aliens. They actually believe they're disembodied spirits back from the days of the fallen angels. So again, there's that. Huh?
I've heard a lot of people talk about that theory. I mean, I think it's an interesting idea, but I also believe in aliens. So, I think it's a possibility. Just like Kushtaka, like I definitely believe that there's this type of an entity. I've never experienced it, and until today, I haven't really known much about it myself. But like a lot of people know that just because you aren't aware of it doesn't mean it's not there, and it seems to be pretty solid, from what you're saying.
Well, to give that side of the argument a hearing, Maria D. Jones investigated and wrote on the Nome, Alaska disappearances, and it was such a bad issue that the FBI came in and investigated all these missing person reports in Nome. And they were no leads whatsoever. But associated with these disappearances, when people were able to see something, they said they always reported these blue lights in the vicinity where the man became missing. Now, to fast forward on that, Maria D. Jones was the consultant on the movie The Fourth Kind, which is a movie based on a psychologist hypnotizing these people to deal with their phobias, when in reality they were alien abductions. Now, granted, that's fiction, but my experience has taught me that the crazier the fiction is coming out of Hollywood, the closer to reality it really is.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of funny. Like the weekly world news is actually going on. You know, that is pretty close to what's actually happening. I've always thought that would be funny.
Hey, Dennis, what's going on with your Native American book you're doing with Bob Patterson about the myths of the tribe and all that? Is that still going on?
Oh, absolutely. Bob Patterson, he's 80 years old. He lives up in LaConner, Washington. And he was very prolific when he was in Alaska. And he was actually adopted by the Tlingit Nation and given the name of White Bear. He's highly respected and highly regarded among the Tlingit Indians. And he's a very, very good artist and has thousands of pieces of work out there. He has a website, Bob Patterson Fine Art. And I stumbled across him by accident, and we started talking. And since then, we have collaborated. And he's providing me images of his artwork to be used in the books. In the second edition of the Kushtaka, he actually did some original drawings to help illustrate some of the mythologies that we're writing on. So what our goal is to record these stories, these native stories, and illustrate these native stories so it can be preserved into the University of Alaska educational system for future generations. Because even he in his lifetime has seen how westernized the Tlingits have become and how they're fast losing their culture, their heritage, even their language is fast becoming obsolete and disappearing. So it's a really great project. I talk to him probably 2 or 3 times a week. And so, yeah, that's definitely something that I'm excited to be part of, is helping preserve these stories for future generations for the Tlingit people.
Yeah, that's definitely a unique opportunity.
That sounds like a great one for sure. I see you have books called Raven Tales and Otter Tales, and are those both considered like tricksters, like Coyote?
Exactly. What I did to kind of follow up with the Kushtaka book for people that want to do a little additional research is I wrote one book called Raven Tales, which is a collection of all the stories I put together that dealt with the raven. And what's interesting about the raven is he's portrayed as a trickster, a womanizer, just a buffoon, but he's also portrayed as a very clever, conniving, manipulating force, even to the point where he's credited for creating the world that we live in. So I did that. And then on the Otter Tales, that's a collection of stories involving the Otter Man, where a man and his family lost their wife, and they didn't know if she just went out in the woods, got lost and died, or what. But a few years later, in a really harsh winter, this family ran out of food. So every night, the mother would come back to this family and provide food. And the father and children had no idea who it was until one night he discovered that it was his dead wife. So as long as it was night, she was there in the form of his wife, like she was when she disappeared. But she had to leave before the sun came up, because when the sun started to come up, she would transform back into this hideous beast. Or, what they call, the otter man. And there's a lot of stories like that where the Kushtaka actually have been very helpful for people. But the stories where you hear of the Kushtaka being helpful are usually where someone has been transformed into one of these entities.
And they're still closely related to the people that they're helping. Right. Yeah. That's pretty awesome. I mean, a question, something that I think about often when I think about cryptids and supernatural entities and this type of thing is what would happen if Kushtaka and Sasquatch met each other, or say, what do you think would happen there? Do you think that they're enemies? Do you think that they're just pretty neutral by each other's standards? Or how do you think that they would take to each other?
Man, that's a great question, and I don't know if I have the answer. See, I'm not thoroughly convinced I have a handle on Bigfoot. Part of me wants to think that Bigfoot is actually another species of being that was here probably before we were here. Maybe it's one of the original indigenous species to Earth before we were genetically modified. So I'm not quite sure where I stand on the Bigfoot phenomenon, but I would not be surprised if the Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and the Kushtaka were all here before we were here.
Right.
Because
I can definitely agree with that idea. I mean, they would have to be. I would feel almost like they would have to be here way before us, and it's like Jeffrey and I have talked to a lot of people about Bigfoot, and Jeffrey's written a book about it and all this type of thing. But I guess a lot of people are kind of in this camp of the paranormal Bigfoot, and then just the primate Bigfoot, and I'm kind of, I think that both of it's possible. I definitely believe in Bigfoot because of my own, or Sasquatch because of my own experience, or what I perceived as that. But like I said, I mean, I've always wondered what kind of mashup that would be between, it's kind of like Frankenstein versus Wolfman. It's almost like what would happen there, and how would they react? But I guess that is, we just have to find out somehow.
If I had to bet, if you're pressing me to make a bet, I would probably bet on the Kushtaka, and I'll tell you why. Yeah. And you're going to laugh when I make the connection. C.S. Lewis wrote in the Screwtape Letters that there's an evil that has an insatiable appetite, and as long as you're in a three-dimensional world in a body, you're never going to be able to satisfy that appetite. The only way to take on more, to consume more, is to become disembodied. And one of the examples I use is Mingula, during World War II. I mean, if there was a poster child for a really dark, sinister, evil person, it'd have to be him.
Yeah,
and
it's pretty bad.
He did what he did, not so much for scientific research as it was for him just to get the kicks out of it.
And he just had all the power to do it,
Yeah, and out of any addiction, you're always going to need more and more and more. When you reach that point, the only way you're going to get to a higher level of satisfaction is just become disembodied. And then you're free of the physics of the three-dimensional world, and you can just run amok all you want. So based on that, if I was having a bet between a disembodied entity and somebody that's firmly grounded in the three-dimensional world, I'd have to take the disembodied entity.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
I'm looking at something in your book, and I'm curious. I want to hear you tell us the tale. So, what is the underwater panther of the Ojibwe people? That sounds pretty wild.
Oh, dude, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Okay, just give me a couple of minutes to build up to this. And Fritz Zimmerman. Fritz Zimmerman's written a lot on the Nephilim. And there is evidence to show that there was intelligent mining going on in the Great Lakes region 10,000 years ago. There's also evidence that there were Hebrew people in the region 2,000 years ago. Now, the underwater panther can be taken two ways. It can be taken as a mythological creature, or it could be taken as some form of a vessel, whether a boat that floats on the water or a submarine. But the thing that's interesting in the underwater panthers, they're always portrayed with this tail, this metallic tail. So I'm not quite sure if the underwater panther is the native interpretation of a boat or a ship, or if it was actually a mythological creature. But I do firmly believe, and I agree with Fritz Zimmerman, that there was definitely civilized people in the United States of America at least 2,000 years ago, and far back as 10,000 years ago. There's just too much evidence pointing to that. So can you imagine if you were this indigenous tribe, and all of a sudden here comes this advanced race up the Mississippi River, in these ironclad boats, sails, and then they're doing this mining. So, I mean, it's one of those things where it has to make you wonder how they interpreted this, kind of like the cargo cults in the South Pacific from World War II. So, but again, the mythology with the underwater panther is very similar to that with the Kushtaka, in that if you steal from these underwater panthers, if you steal their copper, you're probably going to be met with a fate that you wish that they would have just killed you and gotten it over with.
Who was the guy that you said that wrote the book on the Nephilim?
Fritz Zimmerman.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the underwater panther thing reminds me of some of the, like, you know, the water legend monsters and stuff like that, like from the Skinwalker Ranch book and all that stuff, like underwater kind of weird, what are they called, water babies or something? A water baby.
Yeah. And they even have this same creature, in Alaska, all throughout the tribes of Alaska, not only in just southeast Alaska, but all the way up to the northern, shore, with this water creature. And what's interesting is when you look at these stories, they're describing the Loch Ness Monster, a plesiosaurus. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at it from that angle, all of a sudden you connected this mythical creature of Alaska with the mythical creature there in the Great Lakes, and the same mythical creatures you have in Scotland and in South America. It's very, very similar to the plesiosaurus, this, prehistoric dinosaur that looks like the Loch Ness Monster. So again, it's kind of like Bigfoot,
Sorry, we have an audience question from Nora's Boy. That's his screen name, and so I'll talk. Does the Ice Age and land bridge have any connection to this Alaskan Bigfoot story? Do you have any information on that?
All right, this is what I think, and I've talked to Clinkets there to ask them what their thoughts are. Well, one of the red flags for me was the similarities between the Kushtaka and the Kitsune and the mythologies in South America. And there's a school of thought that believe that the people originated out of Southeast Asia and kind of highland hopped across the Pacific, and they hit the west coast of the Americas. When they hit the west coast of the Americas, some went south, some went north. So not necessarily the ice bridge so much, but I really think that the origins of the indigenous people all along the west coast of the Americas, like I said, from Alaska all the way down to Chile, originated from Southeast Asia. There are similarities in mythologies, language, customs, etc. Now,
interesting for sure.
Well, within Tlingit history, and I haven't been able to find anything concrete, but they claim to have traded with the people of the Pacific Islands. And that's kind of a far-fetched claim, but that's in their heritage. They believe that they were sea people, and they had the capabilities at one time to sail to the islands in the South Pacific, and down the coast to South America. So I'm just saying, if you just trace the mythologies backwards, you'll see this route where they all kind of just follow this route back to the South Pacific Islands into Southeast Asia, up through Japan, China, and Korean Peninsula and such.
I think that part of the problem with like tribal history is that a lot of people don't really think that these people were capable of these types of things ever, because of the fact that they're always viewed as primitive or uncivilized as far as like the people who came to visit them or to take over their land or, whatever, is that they never really gave them enough credit as a culture or a society because of their overall view of being primitive, I guess. Because, I don't see why that would be impossible at all for those guys to have that type of traveling capability. And why would they write about it in their legends if they didn't know about it to an extent? How could they?
I think a lot of this disbelief is just a narcissistic arrogance on our part in thinking that we're the greatest that's ever been. Even Greg Braden has said that he firmly believes there's been civilizations on this planet that were more evolved and more technically advanced than what we are. And I love the question, well, if they were so advanced, how come we haven't found any record of microwaves or toasters? And his reply was, well, maybe they didn't have a microwave or a toaster.
All right.
But if you look at it from common sense, if you look at it from a common sense and accept the history that is there, you know, at one time the Chinese had a navy that even by the day standards was just beyond their years. And when China went to the period of isolation, the emperor had the fleets burnt. And Japan, you know, Japan was in a state of isolation for over 200 years. It wasn't until Commander Mary went there in 1853 that Japan opened back up to the rest of the world. But just because they were isolated for 200 years doesn't mean that they had a technology there before that, you know. You know, it's kind of like...
I mean, that's what I've always thought all my life, ever since I was a kid. Once I started learning about Lovecraft, mythology, Atlantis, you know, like all these other places, Raiders of the Lost Ark, you know, I saw all these things and got introduced to all this history, and I was like, we can't be it. You know, I was like, it can't go only 2,000 years back, or, you know, you know what I mean? It just doesn't make any sense. And of course, as an adult, I've expanded these concepts in my mind, and I have a stronger for those types of things. So yeah, I mean, it's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people, I guess, but I mean, it's still there. You know, that's why you're seeing the plesiosaur and at Loch Ness, and you're also seeing it in Alaska. You know, you're seeing these creatures that have been around much longer than we have, and might have changed, might have evolved, or obviously have. You know, so yeah. I mean, this is all quantifiable as far as I'm concerned. You know, just from looking at data. You know what I mean? You could quantify a lot of this, and it seems like you've taken a lot of this mythology, and you know, I use that loosely, mythology, because it's, you know, an historical viewpoint of a culture. So it's not really a myth per se, just because we don't understand it or believe in it. You know, it's all as valid to these people as anything is to anybody else.
Well, I agree with you. And Joseph Campbell said, you know, he wrote several books on mythology, A Hero with 1,000 Faces. And he said there's just no way that you can have all these people isolated from one another all around the world that have shared stories. And he always felt that at one time in our history, everybody was in the same place at the same time and had the same experiences. Then something catastrophic happened to cast them to the winds, and they took their stories with them. The only difference is the stories assimilated into the environment in which these people live in then. And if you buy into Joseph Campbell's thought, and then you're talking about Atlantis. And when you're talking about Atlantis, you're talking about Greek mythology because the two overlap. You're also talking about Noah's flood, because why did God wipe out the earth? I mean, what was here that wasn't here 40 days later? The Tower of Babel, I've talked to some rabbis and gotten their thoughts on that. So there's hints all throughout ancient texts and ancient artifacts that lay credence to where there have been advanced civilizations on this planet before. And you know, the biggest one there is the pyramids. Anybody that thinks those pyramids were built over a period of 100 years with 1 million slaves pushing rocks up them, you know, that's insane.
Right. I mean, it might sound gullible, but I basically believe that in anything could have happened, will happen, or has happened. You know, I mean, I'm not a sucker, but I'm open to the possibility of these ideas, because I know for a fact that certain things have happened that I've experienced myself. And so I know if those things could happen, then anything could happen, you know. So I mean, of course we have to reel it in a little bit just to keep ourselves from ending up weaving baskets in the loony bin. but I don't know if that would even be that bad. But you know what I'm saying, you know.
Well, I think one of the biggest issues with society today is our ignorance and arrogance in believing that we're the cat's meow, we're the best that's ever been and the best will ever be. And because of that, we've closed our mind. And a lot of that is perpetrated by being conditioned through our educational, political, health, and religious systems. You know, Woodrow had a study commissioned to see where the state of the educational system in the United States was at. In the findings of the study, it's in one of my books, The Way of the Tao, came back and says the educational system is exactly where we're needed. You know, we're producing a generation of workers that will be subservient to our needs, but yet intelligent enough to execute the orders given to them. So, I mean, this isn't something that's been going on for a couple of years. This thing's been going on forever. So I think that's the problem you run into. And to borrow from David Icke, when you deal with these things that seem kind of on the fringe, you got to ask better questions to get better answers. So, you know, instead of dismissing somebody as being a Looney Tune, you know, a complete fruitcake, you know, the example I use, he says, I live in Dallas. And I said, if Troy Aikman ran in here right now and said, my God, Dennis, you're not going to believe it, there's a spaceship in the parking lot with 3 little green men running around. Our first thought is, wow, you know, Troy, those hits you took, I think, have finally caught up with you. So that's the logical assumption we would make. But I think the better question is, what is happening for Troy to say this? And do not I owe him that much respect as a fellow human being to at least go outside with him?
Check it out, you know? Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it goes back to having an open mind.
If a kid and they're like, damn, the boogeyman's here. I'm like, the boogeyman? You know, and I'm like, well, what are you talking about? Like, where's he at? You know? Like, I mean, that's something else too. I mean, I listen to what kids say. I listen to the response of animals. And man, I've been in a lot of weird scenarios. And, you know, if somebody says something's going on, like, I check it out. You know, I don't really want to get on this kind of a soapbox, but if you tell someone who's a Christian, per se, like a fundamentalist type of person, if you say the Christian mythology, it's bad. You know, usually they get pretty upset about that. You know, but it goes back to what you're saying, and accepting these types of concepts, and not even accepting them, just exploring them is just that. You know, it's like they would consider the Greek pantheon of deities to be mythology, but they don't consider their own religion to be just the same. You know.
Hey guys, we're about to go on break. I've been in a situation to where I've seen something outside in the heavenlies and had to run inside and grab somebody and let them come out and see it. And let me tell you, it's very exhilarating and fearful all at the same time when you see something like that, UFO-wise. Dennis, you're a jack of all trades. Your bio, everything from Texas Jack's famous recipes to Buddhism to Kenny Loggins, to the Native American stuff and all that, and the shamanic type topics. And then also I want to get into the Kip Winger thing when we come back from break. Do you have a website? And then we're going to go on break for about 8 minutes, and we'll come back and do about 50 more minutes.
All right. I appreciate it.
No problem. Do you have a website?
Oh, you know I don't. But if anybody's interested in any of my works, it's available on Amazon. I'll just go to Amazon and type in my name. I have 24 books listed there, and the Kushtaka book, the second edition, I just arranged for that to be available through Apple, iTunes, Sony, and Barnes & Noble as an ebook. And, of course, all the books in print are available through Barnes & Noble as well. But, yeah, everything there that I have is at Amazon, readily available to take a look and see. And I encourage anybody out there, if they want to discuss, have any points, pro or con, I'm welcome to address any questions, concerns, conjectures that anybody has, because that's how I advance my own knowledge, is hearing the different perspectives of other folks.
Awesome.
Exactly. We appreciate you being on the show. Definitely enjoyed it. I didn't know the Enochian magic thing, man. You're a necromantic summoner. My God, Dad. But yeah, we'll be back in about 8 minutes. You're listening to the Church-of-Mabus radio show.
Whoa! Did you hear?
Listen to the Church-of-Mabus radio show, hosted by Jeffrey Pritchett.
7
p.m. Eastern.
Friday.
Nice. Follow your weird and journey into the high strange. Be sure to stop by www.churchofmabusradio.com for upcoming shows, paranormal news, and show archives. That's www.churchofmabusradio.com. The Church-of-Mabus.
I'm stoked.
Welcome back to the Church-of-Mabus radio show. We're back with Dennis Waller, and we're going to get cranked back up. Are you there, Beazle? Are you there, Dennis?
I'm here.
All right, that's a start. Well, hopefully Beazle will be back in a second. I'm trying to get Joe to call him. He just hung up during the break to get Joe to call back, so it'll be a fresh connection. So there'll be no technical problems or anything with his line. So hopefully he'll be back very shortly. And let me see. So when is your the Native American book expected out?
I have, the Kushtaka, the standard edition and the second edition. And the second edition has more stories, but it also has about 40 pages making comparisons of the Kushtaka to the fallen angels and Nephilim, and using Gnostic scriptures and biblical scriptures to kind of make the correlations. So the next book related to that is going to be on the angels and demons angle with the Kushtaka.
All right. Hold on just a second. Are you there, Beazle?
Yeah, can you get...
Yeah, okay, good. Got you back.
Okay. Yeah, I was there earlier, but something happened. Sorry, go ahead.
So, yeah, definitely keep me in the loop when that comes out, Dennis, and I'll help out with that any way I can to get a copy of that, for sure.
Well, yeah, I appreciate it.
Sounds right up my alley, for sure. So this raven being... When you talk about this being, I have a weird story that I've never really told on the radio before. And it involves Raven. It's pretty weird. When I was married to this chick. She was Italian, and her family was Italian, and they had like mob connections. And I've told part of this story, but when we got married, their family tried to kidnap her during my wedding because they hated me. They called me Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein, Dracula. They hated my guts, and they tried to kidnap her from my home on our wedding day. Like, really. But during that time, when I was married, my wife would keep a diary, and she spoke about someone named Raven that would come in her dreams, and she, like, fell in love with somebody from her dreams. That'd be my luck, right? Anyway, it was someone that was very pale, with long black hair, some dude, and it was like some erotic crap. But anyway, we finally got divorced. She tried to kill herself. Long story. But anyway, later I moved and got with this other girl, this gothic chick, years away from that, and we lived on a street called Raven Mocker. And I looked up that name, Raven Mocker, in Native American. It's like some kind of ravenous spirit that, I don't know, like Wendigo or something weird. I can't remember. exactly what it is, but that was my weird Raven story. And my question to you was, what kind of forms can Raven take? Can it take a guy that looks like the lead singer of Typo Negative?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's interesting, you talked about your ex-wife's kind of neurotic, erotic dreams. The Raven can take any shape, form that it so desires. But what's interesting is you're talking about the incubus and succubus, where this disembodied spirit will possess a form so it can breed with a woman or have the man impregnated, depending on what it is. So, and what's strange is back in the days of lore, these women had no recollection of ever having any sexual activity, but they did have these vivid dreams of having sex with the man of their dreams or some godlike figure that just made them woo. So again, it goes back to all these seemingly unconnected things kind of just appearing over and over again, whether it comes in the form of a raven in, some mythology up in Alaska, or if you're dealing with some Dark Age story from Europe, from the Dark Ages. It's still the same stories. And what you described, my first take is, she was having a relationship with some form of, incubus, succubus there.
When I moved to that street years later, Raven Mocker, it was like it was mocking me, like Raven Mocker.
Right. Then that every time you go outside, you give it the eye.
With the crap, like most of my romantic relationships do. But one thing I wanted to get into, you have a book about Kenny Loggins, and then you're writing a book about Kip Winger. So have you hung out with, like, Kenny Loggins to write that book? What's the story with that? And then I want you to talk about the Kip Winger stuff.
Well, the Kenny Loggins book, I wrote that from the outside looking in, and we do share a mutual friend. And when I contacted him and putting me in contact with Kenny, he suggested that I just get the book done, get it published, and then go talk to Kenny for, reasons that I don't know if I should say on the radio or not, but, sometimes it's easier to go the way on your own than to bring on people to help. But the Kenny Loggins book, when I was growing up back, I was born in 56, so I grew up in the 60s and 70s. I mean, I was a huge fan of Loggins and Messina. And they broke up, and then Loggins went on in the 80s to become Mr. Movie. I don't know how many blockbuster hits he had, Top Gun, Footloose, and such. And, he's 64, 65, and he's still out there rocking. So I wrote the book, Kenny Loggins, and interestingly enough, I'm going to be in Louisiana on the 25th to actually meet him and give him a copy of the book. So that's actually kind of a lot of pressure has been taken off of me, because now the book's done. There's not a lot you can do about it because it's already out there. So, but I can tell you, there is a huge difference in writing a book about somebody looking in from the outside versus being on the inside. And the book I'm writing on Kip Winger, I have been communicating with him for about 4 months, and actually met up with him in Marksville, Louisiana, last weekend at Rockathon they had down there at Paragon Casino. And it's not only Kip Winger, it's Rod Morgenstein, who is the god of drummers, who's been voted Drummer of the Year so many times, they have to just say, we got to give it to somebody else this year, Rod. Rev Beach, who is a master shredder on the guitar, who also is currently playing with Whitesnake at the same time. So, I mean, there's just these incredibly gifted musicians that are geniuses in whatever they do. But the Kip Winger book has just been an incredible adventure. It's just been a great journey for me, because most people know him from either Beavis and Butthead or the Metallica video. Yeah. But, the guy is a award-nominated composer in classical music. Right. Now, I love Motley Crue. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I'll hang with Vince Neil any day of the week and have a beer with him. But as much as I love Vince Neil if it wasn't for Motley Crue, he'd either be driving a tow truck or working in a produce section at your local grocery store. And here's Kip Winger, who can go on stage and rock out with the best of the 80s rock band, then turn around and blow an audience away with his classical music, and then go into another genre with his solo music where it's just mind-blowing. In whatever genre he decides to work in, he's just critically acclaimed for the level of work that he produces. And for the most part, outside of 17, Headed for a Heartbreak, Winger's not really known for anything other than, like I said, that and the Beavis and Butthead deal. And I think it's so unfair. That's one of the reasons that motivated me to write this book. I mean, we have a genius in our midst, and we're not even aware of it. And I just want people to become aware of this music while he's still around. Don't wait for him.
I used to have on a cassette in junior high Footloose soundtrack and Winger.
Yeah, my brother and he got me into metal and that kind of stuff. But it's kind of like Marty Friedman from Megadeth. He left Megadeth and he went on to Japanese pop, and he's in Japan now, and he's like a mega pop star over there. And it's completely. He just got bored with metal, didn't really see it as much of a challenge, and went and did something that's completely different. So.
And Dennis, what do you think about the 17 song? That's kind of controversial, isn't it? She's a Miss.
Yeah, yes and no. But then again, if you look in the late 80s. Metal rock was either about scoring a piece or getting over because you've just been dumped. And so, I mean, yeah, it might seem controversial today, but for the most part, those fans out there that are rocking down, they're not really focusing on that. They're just focusing on the song and what the song represents from an era.
They have been telling a story and it's a younger guy with a 17-year-old or something. It doesn't necessarily mean pedophilia.
Right. I mean, it's the same. You can say the same thing about Michael Jackson.
You got to remember the era that it was written in, and it's still a fan favorite. I mean, you get a bunch of Winger fans out there, and you ask them what 3 songs you want to play. I can tell you 2 of them right off the bat. The third one's, going to be Miles Away or Can't Get Enough or Madeline. But the top 2 is Headed for a Heartbreak and 17. I mean, it's just a rocking song. And, there was a lot of bands back then that weren't really known for stellar lyrics. It was all about the music. A case in point would be Pour Sugar on Me by Def Leppard. If you sit down and read those lyrics, they make absolutely no sense.
That's
the television baby.
They were just really high on cocaine or something.
Yeah.
They're like, this is awesome, man. Yeah, let's put some drums to it.
Well, it's definitely some cool history.
That's pretty versatile.
I have DirecTV now, and there's some music stations, and I was listening to Quiet Riot and Twisted Sister earlier. Like, they have this Full Metal Jacket musical, metal station. It's all like old metal. pretty cool.
Yeah, my friend Scott Majeski, a band called Iron Diamond, and he's in a band with the drummer from a death metal band called Skeleton Witch, and they do a lot of the 80s hair metal covers, stuff like that. And they go around, and there's like a pretty big following, and it's pretty fun. It's I was never really huge into hair metal, because I was always more into like the heavier metal, that kind of stuff. But I mean, I think it's cool that they do that, and they have a really good time with it.
Yeah, I was big into Guns N' Roses, and then the whole grunge thing grabbed me pretty. Nirvana and Alice in Chains and all that. Of course, all those people now have killed themselves, but except Eddie Vedder and the guy from Soundgarden. They're still alive.
Eddie Vedder, Chris Cornell's like, he loves himself too much, and Eddie Vedder's just too optimistic of a guy. Yeah.
Lane Staley from Alice in Chains, they found him gangrene, dead in a hotel room. Man,
he wrote some of the most depressing songs ever. I mean, the album Dirt was like one of the most depressing albums in the universe.
I got a story. I was going down the road as I was in junior high. My dad was in the car with me, and he heard Dirt, and he got the CD and like hit me and threw it out the window.
It's like, not today, Jeffrey.
Today. It's gonna rain when I die. I love that.
Yeah.
James had a pretty good comeback with the new stuff with their lead singer. Not bad.
I haven't really listened to it. I haven't checked it out. I mean, I keep meaning to, but I just don't.
Pretty impressive, for sure.
Yeah.
So what's up, Dennis, with the Buddhism stuff? There's a story that I had that I find fascinating in Buddhism. Can you tell us a bit of your history on that? I recently watched that PBS documentary with Richard Gere narrating. That was really good, and I have a new one from the BBC you haven't watched yet, but I want to watch it. But there's a story in Buddhism where the Buddha is trying to do meditation or something, and it rains, and then this Naga serpent comes out and protects him so he can finish the meditation. Do you know anything about that story? A long time ago in my psychedelic days, I saw a Hydra-like creature, and I always think about that story.
Yeah, Buddha was born into wealth. He was a prince, and he lived a sheltered life away from the reality of what the real world was all about. And something remarkable happened to him when he discovered the reality behind the illusion, and that's when he went on his quest. It just took years and years and years. But when he had his epiphany, when he had that moment of oneness, yes, there was, you could say, his adversary, or the one that was blocking his enlightenment actually aided him. And I think that story is symbolic of the reverence and respect that the universe had for Buddha. There's just a handful of people that we're aware of in our history who are Buddha-like. And, I believe in Christ, don't get me wrong. I'm certainly spiritual in that aspect. But I had a problem as a kid with the Catholic Church in the fact that even at 6 years old, I couldn't keep it thinking. So you mean to tell me all the people in China who have never heard of Christ are going to die and go to hell just because they haven't heard of him? All the people in Africa are going to die and go to hell because they never heard of him. And the people here that heard of them, if they don't believe them, they're going to. That's the end. Heaven's going to be a very lonely place to hang out. But, now my thoughts are, we've had a Christ-like figure, Buddha-like figure come to us over the generations in different forms and disguises. And for the Western world, maybe it was Christ. Maybe for Asia, it was Buddha. Maybe for the Middle East, it was Muhammad. Maybe in India, it was their saints and gurus. So I'm not limited to only one person, because that doesn't make common sense. That would be too selfish. They're only going to give you one chance. If you don't catch it, you're doomed. And too bad for all you folks that weren't at the right place at the right time. But I think that back to the story, I think that what it means to me is he, even though he didn't realize how special he truly was, the universe did. And it did what it had to do to help find his own way. So, I think it's a very beautiful story. And,
what do you mean that the Hydra was his adversary? Well, what was the Hydra? Was he his adversary?
Well, when he was seeking enlightenment, he had obstacles placed in front of him. And when I say adversary, I don't mean adversary in a bad way. But the only time we really grow as a human spiritually is when we're uncomfortable, when we're not at peace. As long as you're fat and happy and have plenty of beer in the refrigerator, money in the bank, and a pizza sitting on the table, you're not going to worry about life. It's when they cut your lights off and you don't have a job to pay for it, and they repossess your car, your girlfriend left you, and your dog ran away. That's when you're in a very uncomfortable state. And I think it's when you're in those uncomfortable states that you're forced to grow. You're forced to find solutions. So when I say adversary, I mean it in that context. I mean, it was there to force him
more like adversity.
Into the state of enlightenment. Yeah, the adversity. I think it's through adversity that we grow. It's kind of like what David Icke said. sometimes in life, your greatest gifts come to you disguised in your worst nightmares. So applying that thought to the Hydro story, to me, makes sense. Like I said, that they were there to aid him in getting where he needs to be. And sometimes to help you get where you need, sometimes you need your toes stepped on.
Right. That's pretty interesting, because in the sense of, even though maybe the Buddha, being the Buddha, didn't understand his worth, being the Buddha, everything just happened because it was facilitated.
Well, see, there's all these misconceptions with Buddhism and the Tao, and I've spoken at churches. I'm usually not invited back after I speak because I kind of take their belief system and shred it. First off, the Tao, Lao Tzu's Tao, Buddhism in itself, it's not a religion. It's not a dogma. It's not asking you to run around and chant, give sacrifices, build temples. What it is basically a simple philosophy on how you should live your life. Now, let's take Marcus Aurelius, who was probably the most spiritual emperor Rome ever had, and he wrote a book called Meditations. Let's go to the Greek philosopher Epictetus, who wrote the Handbook. When you take Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, Epictetus' Handbook, and you take the Tao Te Ching, and you overlay them on top of one thing, you got the same message. So it's not a secular dogma that's there to be used to control people through fear. It's actually a handbook on how to liberate yourself from those fears and live an authentic life that you were meant to live, rather than being another cow in the herd. And when people will say, well, why is that so? I said, well, what is easier to maintain, 1,000 head of cattle or 10 wild Mustang ponies? If you're ruling a land, do you want 1,000 head of cattle that are going to be subservient, or you want to be chasing down 10 wild ponies all the time? So a lot of this is a lot deeper than what it appears to be. And this is one of the issues I have with Christianity, is it seems that if you can separate yourself from it all and look at it objectively and really study it, you'll discover that the teachings of Christ are in direct contradiction to what the church preaches. And to really piss people off in Christianity is I wrote my second book, The Art of Talking to Christ, the Theory and Practice of Christian Mysticism. And in the back of the book, it's dedicated to Yogananda, because it literally took a Hindu for me to get to see the real Christ as he truly was, not the Christ that he's been manipulated to be through Western dogism in the form of Christianity. So I'm kind of like Gandhi on this whole thing. I love Christians. I'm a Christian myself. It's Christianity that I have the issue with.
Right.
Great.
That's how I feel.
Like I said, Diesel, Christ is great. It's his fan club that worries me.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
That's what I say about a lot of people, because there's some people that I meet and that I know that I feel are an embodiment of that kind of a concept. It's like they don't feel like they're Christians, they don't go to church, they don't do this and that, but they have all those qualities and they live a life according to that type of thing. And that's what I respect, are the people that just aren't even quite aware of it, because I'm not a fundamentalist in that sense. It's like, I've always thought that if I met Jesus, we would probably get along really well, but I would be like his friend that he hung out with when he didn't hang out with the rest of his friends. We would talk about other stuff, we would hang out. Like, I would really like him a lot. We'd get along on a lot of things, but I still wouldn't be, I'd be like, Jesus, we got to get out of here, man. Like, don't get crucified, like that type of thing. And
well, the thing is, if he came back today, he would be in prison for being a terrorist, because the first thing he would do is try to wake us up to, everything that we have that we hold dear is corrupted, whether it be a political system, the medical healthcare system, whatever system you want to bring out, it's corrupted. And he would bring awareness to it. But if you ask me, I think he's the kind of guy that would say, come on, let's go get a beer and let's chit-chat.
Right.
Let's
get you
where you need to be. Now, based on that same train of thought, and based on my own personal experiences, the people I have met in my life that are the holiest are the people that had no clue that they were. Does that make sense?
Right. Totally makes sense.
I mean, you see their actions, you see how they conduct themselves and what they do for other people, and you know that they're special, they're different, they're cut above everybody else, but in their mind, they're just a regular Joe. And
that's just how they live.
Yeah, it's how they live.
It's not a question.
I discovered that about 20 years ago, and I still meet people today, and I don't tell them this, but I just know. I said, you're one of the special few. You're one of the holy ones who are above us all. You know, Wayne Dyer talks about these avatars, the people that resonate at a higher frequency and such. All I'm saying is I've met them, and I can tell you that they don't even realize who they are. And I think that's amazing because they don't have this need to bring attention to themselves because they've risen above the ego. And again, I could always...
Exactly.
I really like Wayne Dyer. I just put up an interview by his daughter, Serena, on my Examiner. She wrote a book, but I really like Wayne Dyer. He just had leukemia and, overcame it, too, I think. Or he just had cancer. I think he's healed from it by now.
Yeah, he's
That's right.
I'm going to tell you something else I've learned about the people I look up to, the people that I've had opportunities to converse with, people that have been instrumental in forming the me that I am today. And I'm going to tell you something. Every single one of them was a complete train wreck at one time. Wayne Dyer, he goes back to your story about the Buddha and how, Wayne Dyer is a recovering alcoholic.
Remember,
if you want to make a list of the worst things you can do with your life, Wayne Dyer can fill it up pretty darn quick. Alan Watts, very influential on the way I think. Guy had more serious character defects than your average guy. But I think it's because of those character defects, those addictions and such that made them what they became. Even Tony Robbins, who I've spoke to, great guy, I love him. But, he's no saint.
Sure.
Yeah.
And he'll tell you that. I've made some seriously awful mistakes that I should be very ashamed of, but it's because I created those shameful, awful mistakes that made me who I am. And I think if there's a lesson to be taken from all of this is just accept who you are because that is the you that you were meant to be. You had to go through what you had to go through to get where you are. So,
got to know the darkness to understand it. You got to go through the darkness. Another author that I like a lot is Neil Donald Walsh, the Conversations with God books. He broke his neck, divorced, was living in a tent in the park, eating out of dumpsters, collecting cans to just pay his rent there and to get a sandwich, and then suddenly he wrote those books, and they're international now, but I really enjoy those books, the Conversations with God books.
I still haven't checked it.
It's almost, and I discuss this in my works, and I discuss it through equanimity. And what I mean by that is you can only experience a high that is in equal proportion to your lowest low. Does that make sense?
Yes.
You talk to people in Hollywood that lost everything they had and was a complete has-been, nobody. Can you step out of the way? There's somebody that actually is going to pay for their drink. Mm-hmm. And when they come back, they're a completely different person. They have a quality about them that just shines. So it kind of goes back to Donald Walsh and Wayne Dyer and them. And I really believe this. You're only going to your highest achievements are only going to be in relation to your worst failures. And I mean this in the spiritual essence, not financial. Because there's a lot of people out there that are loaded with tons of money that are just totally worthless. But on a spiritual self-awareness, self-development level, I'm a firm believer in that. Absolutely. And not to change subject, but that's what makes Kip Winger such a fascinating subject is people don't really know how low that he was taken to. I mean, he was taken to a point where anybody in their sane mind would just commit suicide and gotten it over with, but he didn't. He persevered. He stayed at it for the love of the music, and now here he is at the age of 53 doing his best work he's ever done in his entire life with people in the know saying, man, we can't wait to see where he's going to be in another 20 years. He's only beginning to, scratch the surface of his potential. So yeah, I have an affection for people like that, and I consider myself blessed to know them, and even more blessed to be able to tell their story.
Right.
Is he still going by Winger when you want to look for his music, or his regular name? How do you find him?
Well, the band Winger just came out with a new CD called Better Days Coming in April of this year, 2014. And for fans of classic rock that want to hear something fresh and new, this is where classic rock would have been if it hadn't got flushed down the toilet by Nirvana and the grunge movement. So he's still making incredible classic rock music that's fresh, goes by Winger. His solo music, he goes by Kip Winger. And then his classical music is by Kip Winger. So it's just remarkable for me as a musician to see somebody who can go into 3 different genres with authority. And what makes it a fun ride for me is the guy has worked with anybody and everybody. He's worked with Michael Kerwick at Vanderbilt University there in Nashville. He's worked with Richard Daniel Poole out of New York, who's regarded as probably one of the top composers in classical music today. Edgar Grana out of Juilliard. I mean, the guy has worked with the who's who of people in classical music, not to mention the who's who list in rock. I mean, you're talking about Twisted Sister. He toured with Twisted Sister before either one of them had a record deal. He and Dee Snider were having to share rooms to play gigs to make enough money to get down the road to the next gig. So he's had a very blessed life with the people that has crossed paths with him. And for me, it's a blessing because it puts me in proximity with those same people. And, like I said, it's just the best way for me to describe my experiences with Kip Winger and to a lesser extent, Kenny Loggins is it's living the dream, man. It's living the dream. I can't tell you the, sense of pride I feel when you walk to a venue and you got your all-access pass. You get to go straight to the source. And I'm already looking forward to that next week when I'm in Louisiana. So, as an author, if you're asking me what the payoff is, it's these moments. It's not the money, because I can tell you right now, if you're thinking you're going to make a living writing the books, I wouldn't give up the day job so soon. But the reward for me come in the relationships I've made with people that otherwise I would have never had the opportunity to know.
Right.
So it's been a blast.
That's why I like the radio show. That's why I like working with Jeffrey. I do this type of stuff, and that's what I get out of it. I talk to people like you. I get together with Jeffrey. We're going to get together next week with Lamb. We've talked to some really awesome people, and I've learned quite a bit, from pretty much everybody that I've ever talked to. And I mean, I definitely get that feeling. I'm definitely not somebody that's rolling in dough, but I've acquired quite a bit of information, and knowledge from some awesome people.
So Sacred Space, dude. Hey, Smith, I noticed you think Jim Mars, we've had Jim Mars on the show, Occulted History, that book he wrote about elites concealing ancient aliens. How do you know Jim? What's your experience with him in your book?
Well, it's remarkable that here in Dallas, Nick Redfern and Jim both live in the area, and we all have mutual friends. And there's a meetup group in Richland Hills called Satori, and the founder of that group is Phil Withall. And I've spoken at that meetup group several times, as well as Nick and Jim. So when I started this project with the Kushtaka, it was just a natural jump to just, hey, Jim, I got some questions for you. And I'm going to tell you, Jim is probably one of the most incredible people you'll ever meet. The guy is a walking encyclopedia about anything and everything. And I think one time we sit there and talk till 2 o'clock in the morning about anything and everything because he's just like a bubble wanting to burst with all this information he has. And I'm going to tell you something. When he does his presentation on the JFK conspiracy, it'll literally scare the bejeebers out of you because you're looking at this information he has, and from a common sense perspective, it's got to be real. The only thing you can think of is how long before the black Suburbans pull up and you're dead, or you got a hood over your head and you disappear.
Yeah, he's great. So's Nick.
Let's go for a ride.
Huge Nick Redfern probably about 10 times in written form and on the radio. But yeah, both of them are definitely powerhouses. Man, Nick, the way he pumps out books, the secret of that is just, man, he's like a book machine, that guy.
Very focused. Yeah, we did a conference together. We did a conference together back in the spring, and he did a talk, and I was just so spellbound by it because, again, the guy is just so versed. And I think what you'll see when you study their works is you see the interconnectedness to everything they're doing, and it seems like the deeper they go, the more the connections become apparent. And, he does a talk on the Men in Black, and, we all think that's just some silly movie so Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones can have a paycheck. And it goes back to what I said earlier. I really believe that the stranger the fiction that you see coming out of Hollywood, the closer to reality it is. And when you listen to Nick's presentation on the Men in Black and you go watch the movie, it's kind of scary because similarities. You almost don't know what's real and what's not.
I had him on about final events, that whole government studying concepts stuff. That was crazy, man. That was like a John Carpenter movie. That book, Final Events, that's a great book, but we had him on about that. That was a trip for sure, man. No doubt about it.
Right.
There was a movie that came out a few years ago called Push about these 4 teenagers that had the supernatural.
Yeah, I know that.
Ability. Well, one of the featurettes that's on the DVD or Blu-ray is where they talk to Colonel John B. Alexander. And he made a quote, "We have been taught through the Western school system that these things can't be, therefore they're not." And he headed up the laboratories there in Los Alamos on these things. And his claims with what he did with the government and the Army is substantiated by Greg Braden making the same statement. Because, he worked for the Defense Department. And he said on more than one occasion, there is nothing that is too corny, too convoluted that the military is not going to investigate, whether it's remote viewing, whether it's, psychic abilities or whatever. So it kind of goes back to just having an open mind and just, hear out the argument. But I think for me,
there's quite a bit of facts and fiction,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, it kind of goes back to the connection, the connections to all of this. People think remote viewing is just some kind of voodoo fiction that they made just to entertain conspiracy theorists. Well, my argument is, if this is the case, then why did Princeton develop a program that was so sophisticated that they have a thing called the Princeton Protocols that was used at Stanford in their investigation of remote viewing? The movie Inception with Leonardo, Harvard has done a study based on the premise of what Inception, the movie, is about. There was a movie out in the 70s with Eddie Albert about remote viewing and going into dreams where they save the president's life. So I'm just saying, I'm not saying I'm in or out. I just got to have an open mind.
Right.
Dennis, I wanted to get into you we got about 13 minutes is the Ebola stuff. one thing I'd like to hear your brain wrap around is I see a lot of people lately saying that Ebola is fake, and when I see them, I mean, like their threads and stuff, they'll say that it's completely fake. That's the whole thing from the truthers. It's fake. And I don't think it's fake. What do you think about that?
Well, it's not what I think, it's what I know. And I'll go on record right now. My daughter was in the Texas Presbyterian Hospital network, same time that Duncan was in the hospital, beginning in isolation with Ebola. And the family doctor worked out of Texas Presbyterian. So she was released from the hospital a week and a half ago. And he came in the room and he closed the door and I said, look, dude, I got this email from this guy and I want to ask you what you think about it. So he made sure the door was shut and he basically gave us the riot act, and I'll keep the language clean, but I'll go over it. He said, number one, we do not have the wherewithal to deal with this. We don't have it in training. We don't have it in the facilities, and we certainly don't have any medications for the Ebola. Number two, it's already out of control. It's already out of control. We are at its mercy. He said the only defense against this is isolation. The best thing to do is, quote, pack your bags and get the hell out of town. Get as far away from any major interstates or airports. He said go watch the movie Contagion so you can get an idea of what can happen if this gets away from it. But the most alarming thing he said was, don't believe anything you hear on the TV. And I'm here to tell you, I live in Dallas. I've been here since this started. And from day one, when Duncan went into isolation at Texas Presbyterian, the media, the local government has done everything in their power and control to downplay this, even to the point of comparing Ebola to AIDS. And basically, you're going to have sex with someone who is physically sick with the virus to catch it.
Right.
So the rest of the country is saying it's fake because it's being blown out of proportion. There's sensationalizing it all. Well, I can tell you here it's been the opposite. And the reason why is they're trying to keep the wheels on, because if people knew the truth, this city would fall apart. And it wasn't only until yesterday that the wheels started to come off with the nurse who was sick since Friday, who boarded a plane from Ohio and flew to Dallas. She was already 3 days before she got on that plane. So now the people under quarantine, under suspicion, doubled immediately. And we had our fourth case going to the hospital. Of course, they won't confirm or deny it's actually Ebola. They're just saying they're treating it like it is. But the point I'm making is they're on the TV telling you, oh, you have nothing to worry about. You can't catch this. It's not airborne. The person has to be infected and actually physically sick, and you need to almost have sex with them to catch it, while they're showing you an ambulance that's in quarantine, and they have a biohazard team putting everything these people own in that apartment in 55-gallon barrel drums to go be buried in the middle of the desert. So,
Spain, they even killed their dog, and all those people were protesting outside and going crazy just because they killed the dog, which, I mean, I can understand that, but they're killing everything. But, yeah, what do you think about it going airborne? Is that a possibility?
It's not a possibility. It's
airborne. That means millions dead, wouldn't it?
These are facts. This isn't BS. This isn't conspiracy. I mean, if I knew I was going to come on the show and talk about this, I would get my facts together to substantiate it. Ebola is airborne because anytime you speak or breathe, you're actually giving off an aerosol of microparticles. And what makes Ebola so dangerous, so highly contagious, is whatever these particles fall on can live for hours, if not days. So if you're in the elevator and you cough, the residue from that cough goes onto the walls, the railing, the buttons. 2 days later, somebody in that elevator and hit that button, then scratch their nose, and they've just had a transference of the Ebola from the person that was there, say, 24 hours prior. It's a hell of a lot worse than what they're saying. And if you look at it from just a common sense perspective, you don't want everybody to go amok. empty out the stores, took their kids out of school, and destroyed the local economy. You know, even at DFW, I'll give you an example. One of the TSA screeners showed up wearing gloves and a mask, and his only job was to monitor the door to where it's a one-way door. So when you're coming in a flight, you grab your stuff and you go through this door. And once you go through that door, you can't go back in. And he was taken to a room and told that if you don't take that stuff off, you're fired. The last thing we need is people to arrive at this airport and see some clown dressed up in gloves and a mask thinking that there's something going on. We can't have the public alarmed. We can't have people scared. So either you take the mask and gloves off and go back to your job or go home. We have an image to obtain. We have an appearances to keep. So, yeah, if you're asking me what I think about Ebola, I'm not going to tell you what I think. I'm going to tell you what I know. Hell yeah, it's real, and hell yeah, it's highly contagious, and hell yeah, it's airborne, and hell yeah, you can catch it being in the proximity of a person who is infected, and he doesn't even have to be in the same room at the same time. You know, anybody with any common sense can watch the news and see how the CDC is reacting to it. And going back to what the doctor told us, we don't have the wherewithal to deal with this, not in training facilities or medication. There was a coming of, what do you call it? We're going to have coming to Jesus meeting and Jesus not invited. We had one of those yesterday. Why do you think the CDC pulled out the 2 patients that we had in Dallas and took one to Emory University in Atlanta and the other one to Maryland? Because they know that the people here can't deal with it, and they know that it's gone too far. And the only way they can contain it is take the people that they do know it's infected and get them the hell out of here and get them to a facility to where they can be monitored properly and treated properly. I mean, that just validates what the guy said, you know, a week and a half ago. Why do you think we have a nurse that was exposed to this stuff on a cruise ship down in Belize? You know, why do you think we have a nurse who's actually sick in Ohio? You know, they bought into the Kool-Aid and didn't take it serious, and now look where we are. So, you know, it's one of those things where you've got to hope for the best, but, man, if you don't prepare for the worst, you know, this thing could get really ugly really quick. And I think that's the real question, is at what point do you hit critical mass? Is it 20 people? Is it 30 people? Is it 50 people? And, yeah, I've heard the stories. Well, 30,000 people die from the flu every year. You know, 300,000 people die from this, that, and another. Yeah, I know. But, you know, I can be next to somebody who's a beast, and I'm not going to become a beast because I'm next to him. You know, I can be next to a smoker or an alcoholic, but I'm not going to die from lung cancer or alcohol poisoning because I'm next to him. But this stuff, it's real. And anybody who doesn't believe it's real needs to get on a plane and hop over and all over there to West Africa.
That's what I told them. It's like, so the African-American family mourning their, you know, the family member that died, that was fake. That was a psyop. It's just crazy. But, yeah, it's a horror movie. I don't really see how it can get any better. Right? I just don't. I'm trying to see the golden pathway here. I just don't. I'm not seeing it at all. Well,
I mean, part of the problems with this strain isn't there a higher survival rate so that it's more communicable? Like, isn't a higher survival rate? Because if it's a higher survival rate, it's easier to pass along.
The survival rate for Ebola today, based on the statistics they have available to them, is 30%. And I even told my wife this. You know, if you catch it, you got a 7 in 10 chance that you're going to die. I don't like those odds. And here's the other problem that's going to compound this whole thing. We're getting ready to get into flu season. So every schmo out there that gets a cough, a running fever, and diarrhea, they're going to be running to the hospital thinking they have Ebola. And that's just going to tax the system to the point where it's going to collapse. And this is probably the bigger fear than Ebola itself. It's not Ebola itself, but the fear that you have it. So I think the disease is very real. That's a fact. But I think what's going to collapse the system, if the system collapses, it's not going to be the disease as much as it is fear that people have it, if that makes sense.
Fear and paranoia.
Makes perfect sense. All right, we're at the end of the show. Thank you, Dennis. Great guest, and
that was great.
So many things. You're one interesting feller.
Yeah, definitely. You have a huge range.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. I really do. I didn't think my Friday night date was going to be with you, but you know what? You didn't have to buy me dinner. You got me.
Right, baby.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate it. Everybody have a good weekend. We'll see you next Friday with Beazle and Wham with the Wiser Book Horror and the Occult by Lon Milo DeQuette. And it's going to be our Halloween show. That's right. Have a good weekend, everybody. Good night.